if you put yourself around passionate people, then you're going to be successful.
Hey friends, hope you're doing well today. So I'm excited to introduce you to one of my friends, also client, Mr. John Rogers from up in Rogersville. Now, he didn't name the town after your last name, I don't think, but Rogersville, Tennessee, is that right?
Well, Greenville, but close, yeah, right. Rogersville is like basically in the same area.
So I think if you always like living in Rogersville, having the last name of Rogers, you know, it's like, this is your town. This is your
That's
kingdom.
right. I own this place, right? That's what I would like to think.
So the reason I asked John to come on the show today is to tell his story. I think his story resonates with so many business owners around the country, around the world. Now, John's a dentist. Okay, let's not hold that against him. He does drive a Porsche. Actually, I think it's what, 2 Porsches?
It might be.
It might be a dozen Porsches. But, you know, that's an inside joke we have. Most dentists drive Porsches. I'm so envious of it. But, you know, he is a dentist, but he is also a business owner. And he built a dynamic, an unbelievable business here in East Tennessee. And I asked him to come on the show to share his history, his insights, his journey, because all of us can receive motivation from peers. Those of us who are business owners, those of us who are in the trenches day in, day out. So, John, man, I'm happy to have you here today on the show.
Well, thanks for having me. It's like you say, it has been a ride, and I'm happy to share what I can with your listeners, with your viewers. I think it's pretty cool that we're getting to do this.
Yeah. So take me way back. When did you officially become a business owner, and how that come about?
So 2013 was my official time when I went from an employee to a business owner. And I had been working in the practice for 7 years, and it was my dad's dental practice. So I came back to this small town and started with him in 2006, and we worked together. The first few years, as it is for many people, I think, with any business, you're just figuring out basically how to do your technical job, and so my first few years were just learning and trying to take on as much education as I could, and then just learning how to do the technical aspects of the job. And then at the same time, you start to feel the need to learn about the business. And without having a lot of education in business, as most dentists do not, most healthcare providers don't, we don't get that. You really are just a product of your environment, so you see what's in front of you and you go, okay, well, this is one idea of how to run a business. And so I had learned some things that I felt like were great about that business. And then I had maybe started to say, well, I need to seek education outside of just what I'm seeing in front of me. And so prior to purchasing the business, I think that was right around the time that you and I kind of start talking. And it wasn't even necessarily all in the context of the business. It was just kind of like talking about financial stuff and talking about stock market and talking about what investments need to look like. And in 2013, after kind of a long time of trying to figure out what I wanted to do, whether I wanted to stay there, whether I wanted to open my own business or whatever, I signed the papers. And so that was a big day, because it was you already have debt, various types of debt, just from student loans and home loans, and now we've got a dental practice and also a building that was kind of in the background that I was kind of thinking that I'd be eventually buying that as well. So yeah, that was how it all kind of started.
Yeah, man. So you started with your dad in 2006 as an associate, I'm assuming, at that point, and roughly 6-7 years later, approximately, you ended up buying the practice from your dad.
Yes.
So you're officially a second-generation business owner.
Yeah, and we structured it just kind of to know, like we didn't do, like sometimes when you talk about, because I know a lot of people that are in family businesses, and it was very important to us to structure that fairly in that, so we weren't looking at it as like, he's not gifting me this, so we went through all the typical stuff, all the valuations, and talked to, brokers, and really try to do it right so that he would get what he deserved as well, as if I was just a third party. Of course, at the same time, I'm going, I wish I could just have been gifted this thing, because sometimes people think that, they're like, oh, you probably just got this thing, but really, he deserved to get his part. So anyway, yeah, that was, so 2013, we made that official switch, and I did, buy the whole business, bought him out, and he then became the associate. at that point. So it was just a role reversal, and man, that was a big change.
Yeah, I imagine. So he went from being the owner to being the associate. You went from being the associate to being the owner. How did the family dynamics work during that time? Because I know y'all are still buds, you're still friends, but during that time, how was the dynamics of y'all's relationship affected?
I think the hardest time was the last 6 months prior to the transition, because my dad, in his case, he had worked a long time to get to the point where he didn't owe a lot, and so that was a big deal. And like once you get to that point, you have more cash flow. And then like that was right at the time when we were making this transition. And at the same time, he had built this building in 2008 to 9.
Wow.
And so, he had taken on debt again at, age 50 something. And so it was stressful for him, because I think it was, first of all, it was the letting go of that. Of course, you want the best for your family or whatever, but then there's this other aspect of the letting go of the control and the leadership side. And some things I think he was ready to let go of. So there were some positive things, because, changes in any business, for instance, like capital investments. Right. When you're 50 some years old, you maybe know your time horizon's maybe not as long. You're not maybe as interested in spending a bunch of money to get new technology or to get new, because you're comfortable where you're at. So that was good for him. He's like, well, I'll let you kind of be the one who sort of leads that charge and changes things need to change. But I think it was also definitely some stress, of course, on when people came into the office, and now I'm signing the checks, but he's still the senior doctor. And so there was certainly a time of sort of figuring that out of, he wanted to still be a leader in a good, but I think it took a while for him to figure out what that would look like, because people still kind of come to him sometimes with issues initially, and it took a while. But what happened next was completely unexpected. Because about 9 months into that transition, so we had all this plan for what was going to happen. He was going to work for me for a certain number of years, and then he would have the ability to renew that contract if we both agreed. And 9 months later, he gets diagnosed with a rare blood disorder and ends up having to have a stem cell transplant, long story short. And at the time, we thought he'd be back in the office after about 100 days, is what they said, from Vanderbilt. And that never happened. So I went from the, hey, I've got this guy I can sort of rely on to sort of, ask questions to sort of help me. Right. And all of a sudden, and he's okay today, right? So we're thankful. But all of a sudden I faced, this tremendous, like, not only did I take on the most debt of my whole life, but now I lost my sort of mentor and my sort of stability, really, more, because I was in the point, like, we had just bought a house, we just bought the practice, we had our third kid, and now, he's gone. And I had to find an associate. So anyway, and you know a lot of that, but it was a wild time. So that the dynamics became really focused completely differently at that point. It became more about just him being okay. And it went away from, there was no more even need to have any concern about, really, because now it was all on me. Yep. It was all on me to figure all of that out.
As we're reminiscing, I can remember the very first time we met. We were on the road going toward the Greenbrier in West Virginia on a fishing trip with one of our dear friends that we both know mutually, and he was helping in your practice for a very short period of time during this time period. And I can remember as he was driving my car, I think you were sitting in the front seat, I'm behind, and we're talking about this chapter of your life. And there were so many questions that you had, like anybody would have during this time period, of, man, how do I make the right decision? Which way do I go? And at that point, you'd already begin looking for various coaches. I know one coach that you worked with the entire time up until here of late, to where this individual helped you along this journey. So is it in that turmoil that you were going through that you're like, I need somebody who's been here, done that, I need some people who can speak into me? And if so, how did you go about identifying which coaches to plug into your life?
Yeah, I think that some of that, I've always been somebody who is like a research-based person, right? So I'm like, all right, I need to do my due diligence to figure out, what do I need, who do I need in general, and then you have to find the person that fits into that, that description. Right. And I knew that there were certain people that would help me navigate that, but it's like, but who do you go to, right? Who do you go to? Because you've got people that are, great with numbers, and you've got people that are purely sort of motivators, and then you've got people that have both skill sets. And I think that's kind of what I was looking for. I was like, I need somebody who, you know, in addition to having like, you know, say accounting support, which of course you have to have, and HR, okay, because you have to have that. But it was really about, you know, trying to figure out how I take that business, understanding the financials, understanding what's behind the scenes, but how do you actually implement the systems that you need to not only, you know, day to day be successful, but also to be able to grow it into whatever you want it to be and figure out what that is. Like, what did I want it to be? I didn't know at that time, you know, because I never really had to think about that. I was just like, you know, hey, this thing's going pretty well. It's just going to sustain. And all of a sudden you're faced with, you know, how do you define it? So I knew I needed to find people. And I think that was when we first talked more in depth about that. And I remember thinking, okay, so what's this guy know? You know, what's this guy know? And I think as we started to talk more about that, it was like, okay, well, you had both skill sets, which is not super common. The more I've gone out, and now that I'm kind of on the other side of some of that, I realize how rare that is. So that was, yeah, it's kind of, sometimes things just happen the right way. You know, you end up in the same car, the same situation, and then, it, you know, but I also went back, and it wasn't like I was like, oh, I want to work with you. It's like, you know, I'm gonna do some digging here. We're gonna do some, you know, figure this out. Is it right? You know, but yeah, you have to have the right people in your corner, because in my situation, I mean, I wouldn't have been able to really process. You just can't. You can't, as a business owner, process all the necessary information if you've not done some of it before, or you've not at very least seen a ton of people that have done it before and have helped, you know, navigate that with them. So that's kind of where I was at.
Yeah, so we have a lot of business owners. That's who listens to this podcast, and they're dentists like yourself. They're perhaps are financial advisors like in my last life. They're coaches. They're all over. I mean, I know business owners that listen to the podcast that are running 9-figure incomes, and I know some that are just getting started. And so I guess one of the questions I have for you is, at this phase of your story, whenever you got your practice, your father's not there with you, you're trying to get the associates involved, you're a researcher, which is one of the things that you and I love about each other, is we love to research, dive into the nuts and bolts. There are people just like that right now who are dealing with turmoil, or maybe they're dealing with the lack of freedom. You know, the business owns them at this point. You made the statement, hey, I got to figure out where I wanted to go. I mean, I remember those conversations clearly. What advice would you give to that business owner out there that was in, or currently in that chapter that you were in at this phase of your story?
Yeah, I think that first off, one of the things that always kind of hits me because I get those questions a lot now from people, and because they kind of have maybe learned a little bit about what I've done since then, and they're like, well, how did you get there? And you know, the first thing that for me, now this is just me, was that I know that most of these things are not new. So all the things that are very good, like a coach or a mentor or, you know, somebody who's great at business, they usually don't have. They have just done the research, and they have experience, and so I guess I tell people, first of all, read. That's one of the first things I tell people is find, you know, books that are applicable to business in general, not necessarily even your specific business, but business in general, that describe what the roles are in a business and how to kind of chart your path forward. And so there's several books that were very influential, probably the most being the E-Myth for me, because it helped me understand the roles that are defined somewhat by that book are, I think, universal. And it helped me to see the things that I was good at and the things that I needed somebody to help me with, because I could not do all three of the main roles that book kind of lays out. And then there's lots of, I mean, there's a million books we could talk about, but I think they help you to kind of define vision and kind of see what systems need to look like, and, you know, everything to like the checklist manifesto and figuring out how to like have systems in your practice or your business. And it also helps to show you, like, the more you read about those things, the people that you need, you know, because you see like these, no matter what, people that are, no matter small or massive business, people figure out what they're great at, and then they figure out what they can delegate, or also what they need somebody to like give them knowledge on that they just can't have without having a different perspective. Right. So that's what I would say is, you know, read. For me, that was what helped me. And of course, talk to people that are successful. You know, be around people that are successful and passionate about their business, which is why we're talking today. Right. You know, because that's how it guides you to, like, well, you start to hear names said a few times, and all of a sudden you're like, wait, I've heard that name before. The same with books, right? People are like, have you read this? And you start to see these things rise to the top. And those are the things you should be focusing on and reading and talking to. Those are the people you should be kind of seeking out. And I think if you have those two things, you've kind of proven to yourself what you need. It becomes a lot easier to not necessarily do it yourself, but to know what you need to bring into the business to help you make some decisions.
We have the luxury right now of sitting here many, many, many years later from this chapter that we're at in your life and see the results of all the hard times, the decisions you made, etc. And it's a pretty magical journey. It's been a fun journey to be a part of. It's been tumultuous at times, but it has been a fun journey to be a part of. But if we go back to this phase now where you're trying to find that coach, I remember asking you at one point, hey, John, what is your exit? I remember talking about what's your out? What are we driving this company toward? Are you going to annuitize it? Do you want to scale it?
Yep.
And we had a lot of conversations. We're not get friends into the specifics of what he and I talked about. That's his life. That's his world. But I remember one particular piece of advice that saved you tons of money that we have laughed about many times since that day.
Yes.
And that has changed. Just one little sentence changed, and today you have been very blessed because of some advice.
Yep.
But along that journey, what stretched your vision? What conversations perhaps said, hey, I can do this? And then when did you make a decision? Now, when I use that word decide, I'm pretty intentional that decisions mean to cut away all other options, right? Yep. I'm going here, come hell or high water, I'm burning the boats, we're going to charge them out, we're going to charge hell with a water pistol. That's whenever I say the word decide. So when did you decide on the direction, and ultimately what was that direction that you decided to pursue?
Part of it was my actual professional career. As I started to become who I was becoming as like a dentist, as a practitioner, the things I was enjoying. So I started to see the things I loved that got me fired up, and I knew I wanted to do more of those things. So it helped me to know, like, okay, these are the things that I want to focus more on in my business in order that I can do more of the things that I enjoy. But at the same time, those things tended to be more complex things, which meant that those could be, if you structure right, could be also profitable at the same time. Because if you're running your business correct, you're hopefully getting to a point where you're doing the things only you can do. And I started to understand at the same time that I was running my business that way. It was driven a lot by just wanting to do things that were fun, that made me happy, but also at the same time were things that were like higher level things. So I was getting paid more for what I knew than what I did a little bit. I started to go, oh, so that's possible. You can actually move into this other level where you think all the work you've put in pays off. But what started happening at that same time, the other side of it is that I started to go, okay, how am I going to ever be replaceable? Or how easy is it to replace me if I put myself in this position where I'm doing all this stuff that is, this quote higher level stuff. And as the business started to grow, as we're implementing systems, not just for me, but for like associate dentists and the hygienists and just the business in general started to just really go kind of crazy. And a lot of reasons for that, but I started to go, all right, so what's going to eventually happen here, And yeah, you kind of have to decide, are you going to look at this as, it can grow to the point, and I think it did in my situation, it can grow to the point where it's very difficult to ever exit the business because it becomes so dependent on one person and in terms of like the production of the business, the numbers, and then too, just the debt service that somebody would have to take on in order to come in, especially in my area. It's a little smaller town. And not everybody comes out, especially the way debt is now in, say, dental school and undergrad and all that, and comes out and says, hey, I want to buy into or buy out this practice. Like what I did with my dad, it was very doable. The practice was not necessarily this, quote, high-end specialty practice or whatever. It was a great practice, but it was basic. And so if you start to grow it into this thing that you really love because you love all the cool stuff, all of a sudden it can become something where it's so big, like financially, that you're like, who's ever going to take this over? So I had to look at options, and the only options I could find after doing a lot of digging, and we did a lot of talking, and it was a lot of just discussion, was to look at bigger groups that have the ability to actually come in and partner together with people and help them to take, first of all, the value that they've created in that business and actually get something for it. But at the same time, I didn't want to like, get out of the business completely. And so I really got to the point where I said, this is going to be the way, because I know too, with the way things are going, this is happening more and more and more. There's not as many people coming out as entrepreneurs and saying, I want to go in, but now I think they should.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I think they should. They're missing out on a tremendous opportunity. And if they are well coached and they do have good, ethics, and they can figure it, I mean, they could do so much better. But the truth is that there's not as many. At least I don't think there are in my world. And so I saw the future. I saw what had happened in medicine. I saw what's been happening in my field, and I kind of went, I have to look at that. And that was the time when I thought, this is the direction I need to go.
So John, that's very cool. As we think about what I phrase value growth, I can remember having conversations with you around, hey, if we lean into, as you said, some specialty, we laughed about this conversation all the time, don't raise our prices to the bottom, right? Mm-hmm. Don't drive to the bottom, but hold the high ground, build a best-in-class practice, then the value will fall. And we spend a lot of time talking, coaching, driving the company's value, and you just alluded to it, that we built something, I should say you built something very, very special. In small town East Tennessee, we're not in some major metropolis that you would expect to see a practice of the caliber of which you own, all because you focused on value. If you're talking to the audience today who's maybe saying, is profitability really value, or what is this value thing? How would you describe our conversations, this journey that you experience over now 4, 5, 6 years? How would you describe it to the audience, in your words, as value growth?
Kind of what we had to figure out, I think, was, first of all, what do you want? Because I think it can be different things to different people. You can have a small operation that's got a really great profit margin, for instance. That's valuable. You can also have a smaller profit margin with just a higher volume. And I looked at this as, we wanted to do a little bit of both. If we wanted to definitely, maximize the leanness of the business, of course, as much as possible. But really, that was not the major focus. The major focus was, how can we do more of the things that create the most fun, at the same time, the most profitability. And that was more of like a high-end type of growth, as opposed to just looking at, trying to save cost. And I think that that's what I started to see, was that the more that I was growing on all sides, the less that side of it even mattered. And all of a sudden we had something that you could look at the value or the profitability, and all of it was good. You could have somebody come into this business and say, wow, this business is worth a lot per year. And then you could also look at the residual part of the business of, the ongoing business that the book of business or whatever that you have. And I think at the same time, it was always a focus too on how can we put people in key positions that are also like sustainable, so that people are happy with what they're doing. They're in their roles are defined well. You helped me a lot with that too, of like how to define roles and how to be sure that people were in the right roles. And just too, for me, because I was serving somewhat as the technician, and the entrepreneur, like how could I get the management side out of my life as much as possible, because it wasn't my favorite thing. Right. And so you helped me kind of know how to offload some of that, which also again makes the business more valuable, because now you have systems again in place that it doesn't so much depend on one person. Right. And I think that was another major value thing you taught me was, just make it to where as much as possible, it doesn't depend on you, while at the same time, yeah, you're doing the things that you love doing, but it doesn't have to run because you're there. It can still be successful with you, even if you weren't in the business. And that's tough in my field, because there are key people, and if I was to leave, there would be things that you couldn't be just easily replace. But so you can't, it's not the same as some businesses, but I think we're able to do that as much as you possibly could in a dental business that was still operating with like a focus of very like one-on-one patient care that wasn't, this big machine that was impersonal. So there's a lot of stuff with that. And I saw as the numbers were increasing that also just my life was also getting better in terms of what my day looked like. That was the key thing that was like really pretty cool. And what that means is you're not doing too much. You're actually becoming easier to not replace in a negative way, but you're doing the things that you're best at, and you're not having to deal with as much of the junk,
Yeah. Yeah, we often spoke about owner decentrality. I want to move somebody from the epicenter of the business, right? Decentralize the owner from the business. And I think that you are probably one of my favorite students, as I often say, or one of my favorite clients, because you took that and you drove it. And as you just said, your freedom was amazing to see what happened. And I think it's also notable, friends, here, we're talking about dentistry. I mean, if John's not using his fingers, the company's not making a lot of money. So it's not like a lot of practices or a lot of businesses out there. I mean, it's a very unique business, but nonetheless, the reward now. So here we are some 5, 6, 7 years later, and you ultimately made a decision. As you were thinking through the various stages of your business, what decision did you make? Why did you make that decision? How did you wrestle with that? Just kind of talk to me a little bit about that chapter.
I think the biggest thing that happened is I saw the value is there. I also saw what was going on out in the outside world. I saw what was happening in the marketplace. And that practices like mine, all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, but kind of all of a sudden, started to be looked at as something special by other people that were willing to come in and help me, if you will, take some chips off the table. You know, things that I had been building and putting these chips on the table that were all risky, right, and could any time have been lost. Right. If something somehow did happen to me, for instance, and then you have at the same time there's this tremendous value that these other groups are putting on practices like mine, and I saw the opportunity to take some chips off the table, and man, I did, and I did in a major way.
Absolutely.
And it was also really influenced by what was going on just in my personal world. I was seeing my kids growing up. I was, have a beautiful wife. I want to hang with her. I want to be present with her. And I saw that, that was how I could be more present in my daily life, my personal life. It wasn't like I was upset being at work, but, you put in a lot of that work and that time and that effort. And then, being able to pick your kid up at school, there's no replacement for that in the world. And so I realized that I could take some chips off the table, have some tremendous financial benefits in some certain ways, but then also I could be able to be more free to do the things that I loved at home. And that was the best decision I've ever made. I mean, I know that it was the right decision. It pays dividends every day in all the ways that it could. So it was a hard decision, mainly because the same thing that drives you to want to build things makes it harder to let them go. But on the other hand, there's lots of other stuff to build.
Oh, yeah.
Always.
Stop missing out on your family's milestones and vacations. Stop stressing about how to substantially grow your business. Stop letting your business call the shots. The Value Growth Academy is your key to freeing yourself from your business while simultaneously increasing its value. Maximize your business potential and reclaim your time by focusing on the areas that have the most direct impact on your business's value. The Value Growth Academy will guide you through proven growth strategies while offering actionable steps to free up more and more of your time while decreasing your stress. The Value Growth Academy grows your company's value by focusing on 8 key areas and systems and processes that scale with your business. Friends, the choice is yours. If you do nothing, you'll stay right where you are, losing sleep, stressing about your future, missing vacations, working harder than you ever intended to. Or you could take your first step in driving business growth and eliminating the things that have kept you up at night. Visit justingoodbread.com/academy or click the link below. So your journey started and, as you say, took chips off the table within roughly about if I'm not mistaken, 9-10 year period of time, roughly?
That's right.
So in that 9-10 year period of time, you spent a lot of money on coaching.
Yeah.
A lot of money on coaching. I mean, I know at some points it was tens of thousands of dollars per month on the various coaches that you implemented, me being one of those along the journey with you, which was a lot of fun to be on the journey. How do you quantify, or how could somebody who's listening to us that's maybe considering hiring a coach and they're like, man, I got to pay this guy 10, 15, 20,000 a month. How do you now on this side of taking chips off the table quantify that decision in that moment to hire a coach?
Well, I think of it as, I'm 42 years old. And when I was 31 years old, I bought the business. And I'm at a point in my life where I enjoy what I do, but I have total freedom. And I look at that as a complete result of how I was directed through that journey. So I mean, I brought some stuff to the table, sure.
Absolutely.
I brought some stuff to the table, and a lot of stuff, I think, because I worked hard for that, no question.
Absolutely.
But I didn't know a lot of things that really would have, like you say, just little pieces of advice that were literally worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I would equate it to, in some ways, the same as like some of the continuing education that I've done as a dentist. You go to this course, you spend all this money, and I remember going, oh my gosh, that's so much money. And then how many things like that you learn do you have to do before it pays for itself? And the answer is very little. It pays for itself almost instantaneously. And when I think about the coaching side of it, I mean, I would not have been able to be sitting here at this age being able to kind of just do sort of what I want to do had it not been for the coaches that I had that kind of said, first sometimes was like, hey, go, and sometimes it was like, stop and hold and wait, or we need to move this direction, or you need to think about this differently. And once you trust somebody like that, once you've seen, hey, this is working, and you can truly take that off your plate, you can say, what should I do here? And you know that you're actually going to get, the best possible advice. That's worth a ton. So I mean, I could probably put numbers to it, but it would be a lot of money.
Yeah, absolutely.
It'd be definitely a lot of X's
Yes.
compared to what I invested in it. Yeah.
So for this last question I have for you, I want you to think about it in this way. Obviously, we have an audience here, business owners that are hopefully on the same journey that you and I both been on. As we're in our early 40s, well, I'm mid 40s now, in your early 40s. And as you said, we've taken some chips off the table. We are financially free because of decisions in our coaches that have been pushed us in life. And also, we brought a lot to the table. We busted it. I know how hard you worked. I know your skill sets that you brought to the table simultaneously. But let's fast forward in our mind, if you will, and now here you and I are talking in our 80s. And perhaps our grandkids are going to watch this video one day. And we're sitting here reminiscing at this phase. What would you have done differently? Or what advice would you give your grandchildren saying, hey, here's where I may have made some better decisions, or you know what, this is the advice I would leave you with this phase?
That's huge, right? I mean, there's a lot of things that you learn through this stuff, and I could talk for a long time about that. But I'll just say, I think it's definitely early on, I think that I was focused on more of the process than enjoying the journey. And I think that sounds so like trite, it sounds so like, overused, but it's true. I mean, I was the guy that finished college in 3 years because I just wanted to go on to the next thing. I was like so quick wanting to move on to like, oh, what's next? Because I just thought that's what you do, and I was just like, hey, that made me feel good about myself or whatever. And the truth is that, if you care about what you're doing, that and you put in the time, the success is going to come, but you have to be able to take those moments and just be in the moment, and not be on just pushing all the time. And there is a balance, because there's no such thing as 8 to 5 if you're going to grow a business. It just doesn't work like that. And so there's no punching the clock with this. But you do have to be very intentional, I think, about stopping and realizing, okay, I have to carve out this time for this. I have to carve out this time for this. And so I think there were definitely times when I just wasn't good at that. And a lot of that was because I didn't have the coaching. I was just trying to figure it all out. I was just like, well, I got to do this, and I got to read this, and I got to be in this, and I got to go to this meeting, and I got to, And also, too, it was just starting, I didn't start early enough. I started early enough with like the financial side. I invested early. I was interested in that. I knew that was important. But I didn't start as early, even in my own dental world, like going to those continuing education courses I mentioned. Like I started those in like 2014. And if I would have started those in 2007, the process of me growing myself professionally would have started a lot earlier. And like my associate that I'm working with now, I mean, we're going to start that. This is his first year, and we're going this year to start it. And then just from a business standpoint, it would have been trying to figure out, who are those people that I need in my corner earlier. And I think that it would have helped me. I didn't make any I wasn't the guy that made like some massive financial mistake, right? I didn't make some terrible investment in crypto and lose everything, or I don't have that story. But I think it was just I didn't have the focus because I didn't think big enough early enough. And I think that's really what it was. I was just like, my head was down, on to the next thing, trying to just run, and I just didn't think big enough early enough. And that was something that I would tell my kids, like, have the big conversations early, and let that kind of focus you versus just like what's in front of you today, and be around people that will have those big conversations with you, who are like, now let's not talk about this. I know you know this, but like, let's talk about something much bigger. And like, where do you want to be in 10 years? Yeah. Whoa, that's, have you thought about that, right? And I think a lot of people that I talk to, they don't have any of those plans. They don't even have, we just had in our family, somebody just last week, very close to us, who, passed away suddenly at age 40 with 2 young kids with no plans, no discussion, no nothing. And, that happens every day. And I think when happened to my dad, it was the first time that really hit me across the face of like, whoa, man, like, what are you doing? COVID did that for a lot of people, but I don't think it had a lasting effect like I wish it would have. People are back, I think in general, a lot of people are just kind of back to where they were and just doing every day. So just think bigger.
Wow, that's a lot. That's a lot.
I know, I told you, it's hard to like, it's hard to put it, to like distill that, but.
Well, but there's a lot of wisdom there, So I guess as where you're at today, you've gone through this journey of being a second generation business owner. You had some events with your dad that you talked about. You had this journey at home with the family, kids growing up, scaling a business, taking chips off the table, financial freedom, and here you are in your early 40s. And you and I have had multiple conversations around what success looks like in the past. But as you're now at this chapter in your life, what does success mean to you, John Rogers, today?
I think that the numbers mean less than I thought they would. Yeah. And that's the thing that, a really smart person told me years ago. It wasn't even in a book. It was just a really smart person. They just said, the things that you think you need change, from the time you get older, but the wants that are inside you don't. And the things you really want. I'm talking about the things that just make you happy. Yeah. That doesn't ever really change, but just the needs change. So I think that success really is about, are you able to say that you have created an environment around you that makes you happy and allows you to be free to be happy. Yeah. And if you can be in a situation where you can work and create in a way that makes you happy, but not necessarily be under the financial strain, then that is part of it too. It is. I mean, there's certainly, like, we know the financial strain does take away from our happiness. Right. So you can't ignore it. I'm not saying the numbers don't matter. I'm saying it just matters a little less, because I think that, having less but being happy is still the most important thing. But I think that, if you can have that environment around you of things that you can just say, what, I'm in a place where I can create cool things and I can, live in a happy world because I'm around people that are passionate, people that I care about. And I don't think it ever stops. Like, I don't think you're like, okay, and we're good. Because if you're driven that way, I'm always just want to be around the people that are smarter than me still, just find people that are passionate. I don't care what the passion is. Tell me about coffee, tell me about wine, tell me about cars. I don't care. Like, I want to be around those people. To me, that's like success too, is if you can be around people who you love to like learn from, and they're passionate, and you get to like get a little bit of their passion in the conversations you have with them, then you've done something. You've put yourself in the right room, with the right people, and that feels like success too in some ways.
So our audience is varied, as we talked about, and many of us are facing various challenges, and even our businesses today. You're facing challenges, I'm facing challenges, they're facing challenges. And oftentimes we get blocked with cost benefit, especially as analytics, like you and I are. Mm-hmm. And we end up being our own worst enemy sometimes. How would you talk to that individual who's saying, man, John, I hear you. Your story's amazing, to over less than 10-year period of time to reach financial independence from buying the business from your father to where you're at today. What words of wisdom would you share with that individual right now who's just maybe indecisive?
I think to me, that's where it's just talking to people that have gone through it. Talking to people that have actually lived it. I think it's one time where I would tell people to get off the computer and phone and talk to someone face to face and actually have a conversation over coffee or whatever and say, tell me, what your experience has been. And I think that goes with any of these things we're talking about. I mean, I could, if somebody that's a dentist said, hey, this continuing education continuum you went through that you spent $75,000 on over several years, is it worth it? And I mean, I can sit down and show you that it's worth it. I can show you the ROI if that's what you need to hear. Or I can show you the happiness if that's what you need to hear, or the less stress, or the fact you feel like you're more confident. But then on the business side, I can show you, what's actually happened, and it's real numbers. Sometimes it's funny in our world of dentistry, and I think all businesses are going this way. People lie all the time about what's really going on. And so you actually know my situation, so you know that I'm not lying about this. You know that I'm not bluffing this. And I think, if you find trustworthy people who are telling you the real story and, get references is really what it comes down to. Tell me some people you've helped and, let's talk. And that applies to anything, whether it's basic education, whether that's coaching, just let's see some proof of actual results. And if the results are there, you're silly to ignore them. Then the investment becomes a no-brainer. You're like, well, actually, well, I'd be dumb not to do this because this is the return that I should expect on this. And that return can be financial, or it can be financial plus like peace of mind, which is really in the end why we're really the most stressed, is we don't have that peace about what's really going on. And financial is one part of it, but it's just overall just that not knowing what to do next. I mean, that is a huge, huge piece of this, that somebody who's been through it with 100 people like you can say, look, I've seen this before. It's gonna be okay. That's massive, not just the financial, rewards of it.
So as we're signing off on this particular interview, and thank you for sharing your journey with us. It's been fun for me to watch, and I want to tell you personally, thank you for allowing me to be part of it. And hopefully, friends, that you'll be inspired by John's journey. Part of my calling is to encourage you, to inspire you, and to educate you as an audience. And John, on his podcast, when he talks to dentists, I know he and his colleague try to do the exact same thing. So, John, maybe as we're signing off on this particular episode, if you were going to give one word of encouragement to the business owners out there that vary in different ages, that vary in different stages of life and in business, what's one piece of encouragement you would share with our colleagues?
Yeah, I think I would just say that if you put yourself around passionate people, then you're going to be successful. And I think that's if you don't have passion in your life at your workplace or home, whatever, then you gotta change that. And if you can change that, and you're around people who are passionate about business, about life, they want to live and they want to be, they want things to be better. They're trying to do the best they can in whatever their area is. You're going to find that all of a sudden you start to have people you want to be more like. And I think it drives you to just be your best version of yourself. And I think that, if you can kind of embrace that idea of getting out of sort of like the negativity mindset and just be around people who see what's possible, it just kind of happens naturally. I think we insulate ourselves in business so many times, and we just kind of have our own little shop. And we just can easily be like, it's kind of what unfortunately social media does. It creates an echo chamber of like negativity sometimes. And you just got to break out of that. Be around people who are passionate. Be around people who want to be the best at whatever it is they're doing. And you just find yourself, I think, just getting like elevated out of that and just wanting to be better. And all of a sudden you are better. All of a sudden you are better.
So John, man, thank you for the sage wisdom you shared today, brother. It's been a fun journey for me to watch, and I know it's been a journey for you. It's been fun at many times. It's been stressful at others. But
and thank you for being a part of it, because you've been tremendously impactful in my life, in my business, and just getting me to where I am today. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's been an honor and privilege, brother. I think the one thing I'm taking away from that I've been saying a lot, and my team who's around us at this very second, if I say I'm going to think bigger, they may get scared because I'm thinking bigger than I've ever thought before, man. So I want to tell you thank you for coming today, man. Thanks for sharing your insight. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
All right, brother. Until next time, friends, y'all go out and make it a great day.